What if reality isn't what you think? For centuries, science has attempted to answer one of the most profound questions a human being can ask. What is reality? And yet, despite spectacular advances, the answer seems to slip further away the more it is measured. According to Federico Faggin, the reason for this elusiveness lies not in the complexity of the universe, but in a fundamental error, believing that reality exists outside of us, rather than realizing that it emerges from within consciousness. Drawing on his experience as a pioneer in science and technology, Faggin states with conviction, consciousness is not a product of the brain. It is the very source from which time, space, and all experience arise. This claim is neither metaphorical nor poetic. It is a philosophical and experiential conclusion that directly challenges the modern worldview rooted in the Cartesian model. In the 17th century, René Descartes divided reality into two substances, res extensa, the physical world, and res cogitans, the mind, placing thought as something distinct from and subordinate to matter. This division allowed the scientific method to flourish, but it also left a deep wound in our understanding of being. Descartes' legacy survives today in how science observes the universe, as a vast external machine governed by laws that can be written in mathematical symbols. But Faggin warns us, to reduce reality to symbols is like trying to describe love with an equation. What is essential escapes us. Here lies a crucial conflict between map and territory, between the representation of knowledge and direct experience. Modern science has built increasingly precise maps, but it has forgotten to look at what those maps were meant to point toward: experience itself. This is where many of today's scientists, engineers, and thinkers encounter a wall. Their tools have become so refined, their simulations so precise, that they mistake the map for the landscape. But reality cannot be reduced to digital models or quantum equations alone. The essence of being evades containment. It is not an object to be measured, but a dimension to be realized, one that demands inner silence rather than external calculation. Even Albert Einstein, the great architect of cosmic laws, sensed that something was missing. Though he respected the power of mathematics, he also felt that physics was incomplete. In his final years, he sought a unifying theory he never found. Faggin believes that such unity won't come from a formula, but from a radical shift in perspective, including consciousness, not as a side effect, but as the very origin of the known universe. This is where the revolution begins. If consciousness comes first, then time and space don't exist independently. They emerge to structure experience. They are not containers of reality, but products of our perception. The universe ceases to be an object out there and becomes a dynamic stage generated from the depths of being. This shift in paradigm is not easy to accept. Long before Descartes, Aristotle taught us to divide, classify, and organize. His binary logic was useful for building rational thought, but it also shaped a mental habit, the belief that truth must be externally verifiable. Yet truth, as Faggin insists, is not always found under a microscope. Sometimes it appears in moments of stillness, intuition, or love. It's in those fleeting encounters that we glimpse the mystery we try to capture with theory. The limits of objectivity reveal the need for a broader framework, one that honors subjectivity as a valid, even essential avenue of knowledge. But what happens when the essential is invisible? What if consciousness, intangible, unmeasurable, turns out to be the core of everything? Faggin offers a different compass for this journey. Consciousness as the guiding star, not as poetic metaphor, but as a clear direction. While everything changes, while scientific truths collapse and rebuild, the experience of being remains. And perhaps, just perhaps, this is the true beginning of knowledge. Not understanding the universe from the outside, but recognizing that we are the source from which the universe unfolds. Imagine a supercomputer capable of composing symphonies, analyzing emotions, and simulating empathy with surgical precision. Could it ever feel what a musician experiences while composing? Can it truly sense what a listener feels when hearing a Mozart sonata or a Beethoven symphony? For Federico Faggin, the answer is unequivocal. No, because music is not a sequence of organized notes, nor a harmonic algorithm. Music is not a signal. It is a living form experienced in the heart. That inner experience, that deep stirring of the soul, cannot be imitated by any artificial system. Music, like love or compassion, is not something to be represented. It must be embodied, lived. It cannot be turned into symbols without losing its essence. This distinction speaks to a deeper reality, that some aspects of existence are not merely resistant to reduction, they are violated by it. To encode beauty into numbers or compassion into code is to hollow out their essence. They are not data points or semantic strings. They are vibrations of awareness, born of lived depth, and no matter how sophisticated the model, what lives cannot be truly represented by what imitates life. This is where Faggin introduces a fundamental distinction: the difference between dead symbols and living quantum symbols. A dead symbol is an abstract, fixed representation, like a word in a dictionary or a binary code. But quantum symbols, such as love, beauty, compassion, and music, are not translations. They are direct manifestations of conscious states. The poet Khalil Gibran expressed it powerfully. Beauty is not a face you wish to gaze upon, but a fire that consumes you from within. That fire, that vibration, cannot be programmed or digitized. It reveals itself through experience, not representation. Hans Jenny, physicist and pioneer of cymatics, demonstrated this with simple yet striking experiments. When particles are vibrated by sound waves, they take on exquisite geometric shapes. The invisible, sound, gives shape to the visible, matter. This phenomenon is not only physical, it is an embodied metaphor of how consciousness generates reality. Jesus spoke of a love that was not preached, but lived. Buddha conveyed silence more than doctrine. Christ, more than a historical figure, represents compassion in its purest form, impossible to encode into algorithms. Rumi, the Sufi mystic, danced through words that aimed not to explain, but to evoke the inexpressible. These figures did not teach with symbols. They taught with presence. Their message was quantum, not logical. If meaning could be encoded, then presence would be irrelevant. But presence is everything. The trembling of a hand, the silence between words, the gaze that transmits without speaking. None of this survives translation into code. Quantum symbols demand participation, not interpretation. They ask to be felt, not analyzed. The moment we try to decode them, we no longer witness the truth. They dissolve into abstraction, and their living essence vanishes. Faggin challenges the arrogance of thinking that even the most advanced artificial intelligence could replicate that depth. Machines manipulate symbols, but they do not know what those symbols mean in flesh and soul. Mencius, the Chinese philosopher, said that the human heart knows what is just without needing arguments. That wisdom of the heart comes before logic, and it is precisely this kind of wisdom that technology cannot simulate. What separates a conscious being from a machine is not the ability to calculate or detect patterns. It is the ability to feel meaning, to see beauty in the unexpected, to be moved by a note, a gesture, or a silence. In a world increasingly driven by efficiency, automation, and artificial intelligence, this reflection becomes urgent. We may be building systems that grow more intelligent by the day, but remain utterly incapable of feeling. Music, as a quantum symbol, reminds us of what cannot be reduced. It connects us to the intangible, to the sacred, to what vibrates beyond all explanation. And in that contact, in that vibration that cannot be simulated, we discover what machines will never be able to touch: the soul. We live surrounded by information, endless libraries in the palm of our hand. Courses, theories, quotes, and concepts offer us the illusion of knowing. But do we truly know? Or are we merely collecting maps we never walk? Federico Faggin offers a direct critique of this modern illusion. Symbolic knowledge doesn't transform, experience does. Within this brief statement lies a forgotten truth. Symbols, however complex, are only representations. They are not the thing itself. Knowing about compassion does not make us compassionate. Reading about peace does not make us peaceful. Only living it does. The illusion of knowledge has never been more seductive. In a digital age, where every answer seems a search away, the risk is mistaking access for understanding. When ideas are consumed as content, the depth of inner transformation is lost. Faggin warns that collecting spiritual phrases is not wisdom, it's decoration. And no amount of decoration can substitute for direct inner contact. For centuries, humanity has trusted symbols as vessels of knowledge. Words, formulas, doctrines. But as Faggin points out, a symbol is only useful when it points to something living. The trouble arises when we mistake the map for the territory. St. Paul, one of Christianity's pillars, was not transformed by books. He was struck by direct experience. His encounter on the road to Damascus was no theological lesson. It was a soul-shaking experience. From that moment, all his prior knowledge became secondary. The same is true of Moses, whose wisdom came not from study, but from a burning bush, a living symbol that could not be ignored. And Jesus, whose message was not a conceptual system, but a way of being in the world. A clear pattern emerges. True knowledge is born not of analysis, but of contact with the real. Pope Gregory the Great, known for his spiritual depth, affirmed that knowledge without humility is useless. Wisdom, he believed, is cultivated in the heart, not in the intellect. Faggin insists that modern humans have fallen into the trap of knowledge without transformation. We read about love, compassion, enlightenment, yet we continue to act from ego, from disconnection. Information is not enough. Only lived experience leaves a mark. Mahatma Gandhi did not merely speak of truth. He embodied it. His life was his message. He did not hide behind speeches. He fasted, walked, resisted with his body. His wisdom did not come from accumulation, but from conscious living. He was an observer actor, as Faggin would say. Not someone watching life from afar, but someone co-creating it with every choice. This is the key distinction. We've been trained as spectators of the world, consumers of knowledge. But what Faggin proposes is a silent revolution. To move from knowing about something to being it. Consciousness, as the architect of experience, does not seek to be informed. Faggin urges us to reframe the role of consciousness, not as a container of facts, but as a wellspring of meaning. Experiences are not data points. They are invitations to evolve. It is only through this internal unfolding that true wisdom emerges. Any attempt to bypass the rawness of living reduces life to abstraction, An abstraction cannot guide us through transformation. It longs to experience, because only in experience is there meaning. Only there does real transformation occur. Why then do we shy away from experience? Because it involves risk. It means stepping out of the control that symbols offer and into the unpredictability of being. Knowing offers security, living does not, but it is in that instability that the real takes place. Today, more than ever, we must remember this, that knowing about spirituality is not the same as living it, that reading about compassion is not the same as embodying it, that memorizing the words of sages is not the same as letting those words pierce us. The world is full of experts who have not lived what they teach, and perhaps that is why there is so much noise, but so little transformation. Faggin reminds us that we did not come here to accumulate data, but to transform ourselves. And such transformation does not happen by reading about the fire, but by stepping into it. The ego arises as a tool for adaptation. It emerges in childhood when the soul lacks the strength to stand alone amid a world that feels threatening. So we construct a mask, a crafted image of who we are, how others see us, and what we must do to be loved. For a while, that image serves us well. But over the years, if we fail to transcend it, the mask becomes a prison. Federico Faggin describes it with remarkable clarity. The ego is a mask so snugly fixed that we forget there is a real face beneath. It is not the enemy, but it is not the true self either. It is a mechanism of defense that paradoxically blocks us from contact with our authentic being. The prison of the ego does not force itself upon us. It grows stronger from within. In truth, the ego thrives on control, on predictability. It clings to narratives that reduce complexity into identity. But identity is not essence. It is a role, a posture we adopt for the stage of society. When that role becomes rigid, the spirit within begins to wither. We stop asking, "Who am I becoming?" and settle for, "This is who I am," forgetting that the self is not a noun, it is a becoming. Every time we seek approval, fear rejection, or define our worth by achievements or possessions, we tighten the walls of that cage. One of the pillars sustaining the ego is the desire for superiority, a need to feel better, wiser, more evolved than others. Faggin points out that this drive stems from fear, not from truth. Those who know themselves as one with all need not feel better than anyone else. Comparisons are the ego's language. This insight connects with a dominant narrative of our era, the Darwinian view of life. Charles Darwin, albeit unintentionally, offered an interpretation of evolution rooted in survival, competition, and the fittest. That interpretation, eagerly adopted by modern thought, nurtured the belief that we are separated, competing for resources, ranked by merit. Faggin does not dispute Darwin's observations, but he challenges the mechanistic interpretation derived from them. What if evolution is not solely biological? What if it is guided by consciousness rather than conflict? What if, instead of battling to survive, the universe invites us to cooperate in awakening? This perspective becomes more significant when we reflect on modern history. The Industrial Revolution, with figures like Thomas Savery, ushered in an era that reduced humans to cogs, laborers, and resources. In such a world, the ego thrived as a shield and a claim to dignity. But now, in the 21st century, that mask is beginning to suffocate. The soul cries out for authenticity, and authenticity becomes possible only when we recognize that the ego is a tool, not our identity. That the desire to be special is an echo of fear, not an affirmation of the self. Transcending the ego does not mean erasing it, but passing through it. To see it, understand its role, honor its purpose, and then let it go. Only then can what is real emerge. Only then can the self speak, unmasked. In an age where machines can compose music, write poetry, and even hold emotional conversations, a disturbing question arises. Are we mistaking the appearance of intelligence for true consciousness? Federico Faggin firmly maintains that there is no valid comparison between simulation and lived experience. Consciousness cannot emerge from symbol processing, however sophisticated it may be. A machine can simulate an emotion, but it cannot feel it. It can recognize patterns, but it cannot love. This difference is far from trivial. Artificial intelligences, no matter how advanced, lack inner intent, subjectivity, and soul. They act without deep meaning. They have no existential purpose, only algorithms. Alan Turing, a pioneer of computing, once questioned whether a machine that responded like a human should be considered conscious. Faggin's response is unequivocal. No. Consciousness is not a function to be imitated. It is a reality to be lived. The danger lies in how, the more machines resemble us, the more tempting it becomes to humanize them, and, in doing so, to dehumanize ourselves. This illusion is not merely technological, it is cultural. The more we outsource decision-making to code, the more we forget how to listen inwardly. A GPS may guide our steps, but it cannot teach us purpose. A machine may mimic empathy, but it cannot feel your pain. When imitation becomes indistinguishable from presence, we risk replacing soul with simulation. Faggin warns us that if we do not remain vigilant, we may wake up in a world where nothing truly feels, and no one remembers what it meant to be fully alive. Modern technology, in its race for efficiency, has been driven by an egocentric model. It develops without integrating the dimension of the soul. It is built on calculation, not care. It is designed to scale, not to heal. Steve Jobs, with all his aesthetic brilliance, never hid his fascination with technology as a means of control rather than spiritual integration. His legacy transformed the world, but did not necessarily make it more conscious. This issue runs deep. Since Descartes, mind and body were separated. Humanity was reduced to a biological machine. This mindset laid the foundations of modern science, but it also stripped it of its soul. Faggin calls for the recovery of that soul, for questioning the direction of a humanity that increasingly hands over its power to systems incapable of feeling. Because when we allow soulless machines to make ethical, educational, or medical decisions, we risk losing what makes us truly human. Technology is not the enemy, but without soul, it is dangerous because it can replicate everything except what truly matters. For centuries, science and spirituality walked separate paths. One clung to data, the other to faith. One observed, the other felt. But this division, says Federico Faggin, was artificial. Human beings are not just mind or just soul. We are both. And any vision that excludes a part of the whole is doomed to remain incomplete. Science without consciousness is blind. Spirituality without reason is dangerous. We need both. With this statement, Faggin does not propose a superficial fusion, but a deep reconciliation, a science that recognizes consciousness as an active part of the universe, a spirituality that embraces clear, rigorous thought without fear. For centuries, scientific reductionism tried to explain life as a sum of parts: love, intuition, creativity. all translated into chemical impulses, neural responses, mechanisms. But in doing so, something was lost, because what is essential cannot be reduced. It can only be lived. This shift also invites us to reconsider how we define truth. For centuries, science has equated truth with what can be measured or repeated. But in human experience, the most profound truths, such as love, beauty, or spiritual awakening, often defy measurement. They are singular, vivid, unrepeatable. To ignore them is to reduce life to a mechanism. Faggin urges a science brave enough to face the immeasurable, one that does not discard the mysterious, but recognizes it as a doorway to deeper understanding. In this new vision, the heart reclaims its place, not just as a physical organ, but as a center of subtle perception. In many traditions, the heart was seen as the seat of wisdom. Modern science is beginning to sense that the heart has memory, resonance, its own intelligence. Faggin speaks of the human being as a co-creator. We are not here to observe the universe as passive spectators. We are here to participate, to intuit, feel, decide, and create. Consciousness does not observe reality, it shapes it. Mahatma Gandhi embodied this integration. His struggle was rational, strategic, but also deeply spiritual. He thought clearly and acted compassionately. He did not seek to impose, but to awaken. And that is why he transformed nations without firing a single bullet. Jesus was another example of this union. He did not come to teach theology, but to live a science of the soul. His miracles were not magic. They were manifestations of a consciousness unified with the divine. His message was, and still is, radically integrative. And then there is Rumi, who expressed it poetically. You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the ocean in a drop. The empathic science Faggin proposes is not a utopia. It is an urgent necessity. Because only when knowledge is united with love can the world truly be transformed. We live in a time of transition. Something is crumbling and something is being born. It's not just a political, economic, or technological crisis. It's much deeper. It is the end of a humanity centered on the ego and the emergence of one guided by consciousness. Federico Faggin states it clearly. We are on the threshold of a new humanity, no longer reactive, but creative, no longer divided, but conscious. Evolution is no longer about adapting to the physical environment. That was the first chapter. Now, true evolution is about remembering who we are in essence. The soul has waited patiently. For millennia, it has whispered from the depths of the heart. Today, those whispers become an undeniable call. The destiny of the human being is not to survive, it is to awaken. And that awakening is not outward, but inward. In the words of mystic and scientist Teilhard de Chardin, we are not human beings having a spiritual experience, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. This sentence summarizes the entire shift in consciousness that Faggin proposes. No longer is it enough to accumulate knowledge, data, or theories. What matters is to embody knowledge, to feel it, to live it, to transform it into wisdom. A new humanity cannot be sustained by fear, competition, or separation. It must be nourished by love, collaboration, and unity. The ego was a necessary step, but now it is time for the soul. Carl Jung, from the depths of psychology, foresaw this. The process of individuation is not about becoming special, but about becoming authentic. The self is not constructed, it is revealed. It lives in each of us, waiting to be freed from masks. This transformation is not simply ideological or theoretical. it must be felt in the fiber of everyday life. It asks us to rethink our values, our priorities, and how we relate to each other. A conscious humanity is not born from declarations, but from presence, from the choice to listen instead of argue, to embrace instead of judge, to honor silence as much as speech. Faggin reminds us that awakening is not a dramatic event, but a gradual unfolding. It is the quiet courage to live with integrity, to act from love even when the world chooses fear. It's about learning to see the divine in the ordinary, in a sunrise, in laughter, in the space between breaths. There lies the revolution, subtle, sacred, unstoppable. This awakening also implies a new way of looking at science, spirituality, art, and education. Science must no longer deny the invisible. Spirituality must no longer fear reason. Art is no longer mere expression, but connection. Education no longer trains the obedient, but awakens conscious creators. Albert Einstein, with his clarity, once said, "The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift." Faggin rescues that gift. He believes in a humanity guided by intuition, by the wisdom of the heart, by a logic that does not impose, but listens. The universe is no longer seen as a machine, but as an expanding consciousness. The Tao of Lao Tzu echoes here. Flow with what is real, without forcing, without manipulating. Beauty, not as ornament, but as soul's vibration, returns to the center. In art, in nature, in a child's gaze, in a compassionate gesture. Beauty awakens, it unites, it restores. This new humanity will not be perfect. It does not need to be, but it will be conscious. And that changes everything. Because when the human being remembers itself as embodied consciousness, everything finds meaning, pain, joy, time, death, love. Faggin offers no final answers. He gives no formulas, but he points the way. The real journey is not to the stars, it is to the center of the self. There, in the deepest place, the soul waits. And when all of humanity hears its voice, the age of spirit will have begun. And that concludes our video. If you enjoyed the content as much as we did, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Leave a comment below. We'd love to hear your feedback and suggestions for future videos. And don't forget to turn on notifications to stay up to date with all our updates. Thanks for being part of our community. See you in the next video.